Hey y'all, just a couple things that I wanted to talk through. Most of this is stated somewhere, but I know there's a few things that are not. So I wanted to mention a couple things that I think are pretty important that folks seem to have a hard time with the first go round on the personnel policies and interview procedures assignment, and then just a couple other things to revisit. First, sorry, I had a little technology glitch there. For this next assignment, and for most assignments, I am not picky on the format. The major thing is just make sure it's clear enough that I know what I'm looking at. Headings, just saying, personnel policies, and then going from there. I know that I'm looking for 10. So I guess what I'm saying is there's no specific format to use. Just make sure I know what I'm looking at, and your name is in the assignment too, because that is a serious thing for me when I have downloaded all of these and there's like 3 or 4 with no name, and then you have to go back and figure all that out. Clarity. So the piece with the hiring procedure is, let's say you are on a leave of absence and your center needs to hire a new teacher. You should have someone in an administrative position or stepping in, whatever that role may be, but that can go in there and pull that out of the drawer and it be specific enough that you both would end up choosing the same person. The big thing with this is that a lot of times we tend to use subjective language, and think of that in a way where it's a word that we could both interpret differently. A lot of times this will have to do with what you're looking for in the candidate. I see words like looking for a friendly person. Friendly to me might not be the same thing as friendly to you. Same thing with appropriately dressed. That one is totally open to interpretation. What someone considers appropriate dress for an interview, another person may not. And that has to do with where you're from, what you have money to afford. But then there's also that line of what are your expectations for someone coming into the interview. So if you're going to go there, make sure that you are specific. And along with that, you need to be sure to back those up. Think about the link for equal employment opportunity laws. That is in the lesson this week. And also, if you're going to say things like that, include a dress code policy for staff and explain why you do it. But also, at the same token, think about, when I say be lenient to some extent, you're talking about a workforce that might make $10 an hour. So we can't expect them to come in looking like they are interviewing for, a high-end tech company. So just be sure to be really clear in that. And another point that I want to make is the use of gender pronouns. I know our field is filled with typically females, and a lot of times I'll find things turned in that are she pronouns being used throughout. But if you were to ever have to turn this in, if something happened legally and you've used she throughout, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like you're aware of equal employment opportunity laws. You could have any person applying for this role. And as a matter of fact, I would hope we would jump all over a male in the center just to be able to have more male teachers as role models for young children. In addition, the use of the word parent, especially when you get into policies, when you start thinking about be sure to talk to parents every day, not everyone is a parent. Make sure that you are considering all possible family structures. Things are different today than they have been in the past, and I know depending on where you are, you may not experience that so much, but just be sure that your language is inclusive. When we talk about diversity and that you don't not hire based on gender, race, all of that clause, think about diversity in terms of staff when you're hiring. What are you looking for? It's not just about race or gender or ability or, all those common things that we think of first, but think about what is your staff like now and how can you look for making your staff more diverse in their specialties. You've got tons of staff, let's say, that have an infant toddler certificate, maybe more experience in that area. What might you look for in order to strengthen having a more well-rounded staff? Just something to think about. And another note is, a lot of times I'll see the person is going to be part of the interview process, is going to work in a room. Pause. I want you to think about all of the implications of having someone work in a classroom. First, they need to be a legal employee. You need a W-2. They need to have a paycheck if you are asking them to work in a classroom. In addition, you could have somebody go through that process and put them in the classroom for a day and figure out that they are not a great fit at all. Something could happen. You don't know this person from anything, and you're setting yourself up for potential issues. So get creative and think of other ways that you can do this. You can ask them to observe for a very short period of time. You can have them meet people. But there's a fine line between observing and actually participating, working, and being responsible for children in a classroom. Other things to think about, the piece of including your mission statement is make your mission statement specific to you and make it reflect your beliefs. When I say specific, I start thinking about how many mission statements I see that are so broad and so generic that say things like providing high quality and a safe environment for all children. Okay, first of all, what does quality mean? It's not about a star rating. What does quality actually look like? So something that means a little bit more than that would be, what does quality mean to you? And then figure out how to use that instead of just the word quality. So if quality is a loving environment where you provide one-on-one individualized attention, you can replace that phrase right there and have a more specific mission statement. And then I guess the second part of that is, whatever your mission statement is, don't have your policies contradict your mission. So if you say something about being inclusive, let's say, of all children, you need to have policies, if this is applicable, where we see how you support staff in ways to have the training, the support, the time that they need in order to provide planning for individualized attention. In other words, I would not expect you to say something like that in your mission statement, but then have no paid planning time, because how are staff going to ever be able to plan for each child's needs? I would also expect to see low ratios, because you cannot do that with ratios at a typical setting, or other staff that come into the classroom. Ethical considerations and evidence of developmentally appropriate practices. So honestly here, I started spewing out all these different types of policies, but again, this is really just saying, look at what you're asking in your policies and make sure that there's nothing questionable. And I gave an example. So let's say in your personnel policies, you mention, we use, I don't know, I'm totally going to make this up, ABC time curriculum. And what that is a learning program where children are supported in reading, and you must do these activities in every classroom. That's not showing me evidence that you're aware of what is developmentally appropriate. If you have questions, because that one's a little hairy, look back at NC Feld, the foundation's documents, and just make sure what you're asking aligns with those practices of what we know to be appropriate for children at specific ages. In addition, don't say things like, we support all staff, and then your policies don't show that you really believe that. Just think about your expectations and how do you want to be treated as an adult. We say that we want professionals who have autonomy and can make decisions in the classroom, but then we have practices in place like you can't move anything in here because someone else has set it up for an assessment. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. make sure it all aligns. If you've got questions about this, do not hesitate to contact me because I'd love to talk to you about it and make sure that we're both on the same page. This is not an assignment setting anyone up to fail. When I see assignments turned in, if something just is way off track, I am going to give you an opportunity to work with me and make some revisions. I know that this is a high stakes course for some folks. You need it to keep your job. Again, it is what it is, but think of everything that you're turning in as your best work, and I am here to work with you to go from there. The whole reason for this is the hiring process is for consistency. Your policies are too. If you don't have a policy about discipline for staff, there is no fair or legal way for anyone to know what the repercussions are if something is continuously violated. It's also legal documentation. If someone sues you and says, I did not get hired there because I had my nose pierced, but then you haven't reflected anything in your hiring process that you are aware of any equal opportunity employment laws, you've asked some questions or shown some questions that you tend to ask that even might be questionable, you need to cover yourself so that you are showing evidence in this paperwork that you know what is right, you know what is legal, you're aware of regulations, sanitation, all of those pieces when they're applicable, and they need to be very clear. In addition, I wanted you to think about the hiring process so that you can start thinking about how to hire to fit your team and your mission. This isn't just about filling a space. And I do understand that we are often in a place where that seems like the need. But if you think about the cost of turnover in the lesson this week, you're going to see that it's a quick solution is not always, it's not even a solution. It's a Band-Aid. And Band-Aids are not sustainable. Last but not least, it's kind of a marketing opportunity. When someone comes to apply for a job, that first big step is getting to see your policies and some procedures that are expected of them. So how do you write it in a way that makes them want to work with you? You shouldn't sound like a dictator. Just think about how you would want to be treated. What do you want to look for? What are some practices that would make you say, wow, they really care about supporting staff and children, and everything is just falling in line and lining up with what you're saying and what you're doing. Now, I know I'm going to hammer this until it's that whole phrase of what, beating a dead horse. Discussion boards. Critical thinking is about questioning our assumptions. What do you think? Is that true? What evidence is there that might actually go against what it is that you think? Look for evidence against your point of view. Play devil's advocate. Do that with your classmates, because this is how we're really going to get to thinking about what are some ways that we can do things that are not the way they've always been done. I saw a lot in the board about Jenny and David of wanting to say, well, he should have done this and she should have done that. But what I'm trying to get us to think about is the lens of the administrator. We can't just go in and say, you should do this, you should do that. Everyone is bringing something to the table, and it is our job to find that in people, human potential, just like Maurice talks about in the book that we're reading. And to find these little golden pieces that are within people and figure out how to play off of those strengths. A lot of times that's really just getting down to having a talk about what you value and how can we honor those values in the classroom so that we can work together to still provide the best experiences for the staff as well as the children. And think about in your discussions adding to what's already being said. You guys are mostly doing a pretty decent job of this, but the posts that are that whole, I agree, great thought, go beyond that. You have more to say than that. There is more in your brain. Don't be afraid of what your thoughts are. And I know that that's a statement that's easy for me to say on this side of it, but no one is here to judge your beliefs. We're really just trying to learn from each other. The readings and the lessons, there's nothing that is me sitting here making you memorize anything. I'm never going to give anyone a quiz because that's not how we learn. People learn by taking information and applying it to their own experiences. I think some great ways to do that are through discussions. Some of that is going to be self-motivation on your part. I can see on this end who is looking at what lessons and readings and how much time you're spending. I'm not here to babysit. That's going to come out, I think, itself in some of the content, or assignments, I should say. But you're going to get out of this what you put into it, and make sure you check out the feedback from graded lessons. It goes to your Jmail. I usually try to put quite a bit of time into that, but it's also related to assignments that are coming up. So the feedback is there to help. And if anything doesn't make sense, or if you have specific questions, suggestions, especially when you have the opportunities for the feedback in the Moodle pages, a lot of times I do those anonymously because I don't want folks to feel like I'm out to get anyone. And then people will say things that are quite specific, like a question, and I can't necessarily answer it because I'm not sure who you are. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to call me, text me, Jmail, and I'm here to help you as much as possible. Y'all are doing great. And if you think of it this way, you're at the 4-week mark, which means you're actually pretty much halfway there. You've got this. And if you have questions, you know where to find me.